Under the cover of Dublin's streets, where criminal underworlds thrive in silence, a deadly plot was unfolding. A high-profile target was marked. James Gately, a man who had evaded death once before, found himself living on borrowed time. His list of enemies was long, but one stood above the rest: the notorious Kinahan organised crime group. This wasn't just another attempt on his life. This time, they brought in someone special, someone feared across Europe, a man whose very name sent shiver down the spines of those who knew his reputation. Imre Arakas, an assassin for hire. Known as the Butcher, his services had been called upon by mafia dons, narcotic lords and warlords alike. His success rate was terrifying, his methods unnervingly precise. He was the embodiment of cold efficiency, a man who never missed. They thought the plan was foolproof, until it wasn't. Arakas was flown in under the radar, his arrival unnoticed by all but the trusted circle of Kinahan associates who coordinated his every move. With Gately still alive, the stakes were higher than ever. Arakas had one mission: track down Gately, eliminate him, and disappear without a trace, leaving behind only blood and silence. Here's how it happened, according to renowned Irish journalist Nicola Tallant.
If we start with the conspiracy to murder James Mago Gately, he arrived in Ireland posing as a fishing enthusiast. He got a bus into Dublin.
But fate had other plans. What was meant to be a swift, clean execution turned into a spectacular failure. Within days of landing in Dublin, the feared hitman was taken down, caught in the act by the Garda. The would-be assassin, who'd eluded the authorities for decades, found himself behind bars, his criminal career in tatters. This wasn't just a victory for the Garda, it was a blow to the very heart of the Kinahan Cartel. The arrest of Imre Arakas marked a turning point, exposing cracks in the syndicate's seemingly impenetrable armour. This moment sent shockwaves through the underworld, showing that even the most feared hitmen and drug lords weren't beyond the reach of the law. But the story of Imre Arakas didn't begin with this failed hit, and it certainly didn't end there. Behind his cold, ruthless exterior lay a long and bloody career. A career that spanned decades and crossed borders, from the back alleys of Eastern Europe to the narcotic-laden shores of Spain. Delving deeper into this tale, I'll uncover the intricate web of violence, power and betrayal that brought Imre Arakas to Ireland, and the events that led to the downfall of one of Europe's most feared hitmen. This is the story of the hit that wasn't, the failed assassination that exposed the underworld's darkest secrets and brought the Kinahan OCG's most feared enforcer to his knees. Imre Arakas wasn't your ordinary contract killer. His reputation stretched far beyond the borders of his native Estonia. For decades, he operated in the shadows, leaving a trail of bodies across Europe, his fingerprints on some of the most high-profile criminal plots of the 21st century. But it was the job he took in 2017, just another routine hit for him, that would ultimately expose the full extent of his connections to one of the most dangerous criminal organisations in the world, the Kinahan Cartel. But how did a man of Arakas's calibre, a former freedom fighter turned mercenary, come to be involved in one of the most significant criminal feuds in Irish history? Let's find the answer to this question, and some more, by exploring Arakas's happening life. This is the story of a man who started from the collapsing Soviet Union. One fought for Estonia's independence and somehow landed in the narcotic shores of southern Spain, where the Kinahans ruled with an iron fist. So, how does Arakas's story start? Born in the Soviet-occupied Estonia in the 1950s, Imre Arakas came of age at a time of immense political upheaval. Estonia, like the other Baltic states, was under the strict control of the USSR, and life for most citizens was one of repression and survival. But for young Imre, life under Soviet rule wasn't just about surviving, it was about fighting back. From an early age, he harboured a deep hatred for the Soviet regime, a hatred that would drive him to join the Estonian independence movement in the late 1980s as the Soviet Union began to crumble. Arakas was an active participant of the movement, joining armed militias and engaging in guerrilla warfare against the Soviet forces. It was during this time that he developed a taste for violence, honing the skills that would later make him one of the most feared hitmen in Europe. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a new beginning for both Estonia and Arakas, but for the latter, it was a darker one. As Estonia gained its independence, many of those who'd fought in the resistance laid down their arms and returned to civilian life. But Arakas wasn't one of them. Instead, he used the chaos of the post-Soviet era to his advantage, turning to a life of crime. With his military training and connections in the underworld, he quickly became a valuable asset to criminal organisations across Eastern Europe. It wasn't long before he made a name for himself as a reliable enforcer, a man who could be trusted to carry out even the most dangerous jobs. By the late 1990s, Arakas had fully embraced his new life as a contract killer. He was ruthless, efficient, and utterly devoid of emotion when it came to his work. His reputation spread quickly, and soon he found himself working not just for Eastern European crime syndicates, but for organised crime groups across the continent. His services were in high demand, and he travelled frequently, always on the move, always one step ahead of the law. But it was in the early 2000s that Arakas truly came into his own. He moved to Spain, joining the growing community of expat criminals who had fled there from all corners of Europe. Spain, particularly the southern coast, had become a haven for organised crime, a place where criminals could live in luxury while running their operations from a distance. It was here that Arakas first came into contact with the Kinahan syndicate. Now, we've said much about Christy Kinahan Sr. and his sons, so we won't bore you with the details. But if you want to go down memory lane and find out more about this small-time Dublin-based family crime group that turned into a leviathan of the international underworld, watch our previous videos about the Kinahans. The Kinahans were ruthless in their pursuit of power, and they had no reservations about resorting to violence to eliminate their rivals. It was this reputation for brutality that first drew Imre Arakas to their attention. The Kinahans needed a killer, someone with precision and discretion, and no fear of getting their hands dirty. And Arakas, with his military background and extensive experience as a hitman, fit the bill perfectly. By the mid-2000s, Arakas had become a regular contractor for the Kinahans. He carried out hits across Europe on their behalf, eliminating rivals and ensuring the cartel's dominance in the illicit trade. Despite his growing ties to the cartel, Arakas remained a shadowy figure. He operated in the shadows, rarely appearing in public, and few outside of the criminal underworld even knew his name. That would all change in 2017. But before we jump into that incident, let's take a journey back 2 years before to understand the context. In 2015, the fragile peace between Ireland's two most powerful criminal organisations, the Kinahan Syndicate and the Hutch gang, was shattered when Gary Hutch, a member of the Hutch family, was gunned down in Spain. His elimination, widely believed to have been ordered by the Kinahans, set off a chain reaction of retaliatory assassinations that would plunge Dublin into a bloody gang war. By 2017, the feud had reached a boiling point, and the Kinahans were desperate to strike a decisive blow against their rivals. One of their main targets was James "Mago" Gately, a senior member of the Hutch gang who had managed to survive several previous assassination attempts. The Kinahans needed someone who could finish the job, someone who wouldn't miss. Can you guess who they turned to? The plan was simple. Arakas would fly into Dublin from Spain, locate Gately, and take him out. It was a routine job for a man of Arakas's experience, and he accepted the contract without hesitation. But what neither he nor the Kinahans realised was that Gately wasn't just any target. He was a marked man, and the Gardaí had been keeping a close eye on him for months. On April 3rd, 2017, Imre Arakas arrived in Dublin, having flown in from Alicante, Spain, and was staying in a safe house managed by the Kinahans. From the moment he landed, he was under surveillance by both the Garda and British agencies. The authorities had been monitoring the Kinahans' communications for weeks, and they knew that the hit was imminent. They just didn't know when or where, but they knew it was coming. Arakas, oblivious to the fact that he was being watched, set about preparing for the job. He scouted out Gately's location, tracking his movements and gathering the intelligence needed to carry out the assassination. But as he prepared to make his move, the net began to close around him. The Garda had intercepted communications between Arakas and his Spanish handlers, and they knew that the hit was imminent. On April 4th, just one day after Arakas arrived in Dublin, they moved in. In a coordinated operation, they raided the safe house where Arakas was staying and arrested him before he could carry out the hit. The arrest of Imre Arakas was a major victory for the authorities, but it was also a massive blow to the Kinahans. Not only had they lost their top enforcer, but the failed hit on Gately exposed the full extent of their operations. The intelligence gathered from the raid, combined with the surveillance of Arakas, gave the authorities a rare glimpse into the inner workings of the crime group. For Arakas, it was the end of the line. He was charged with conspiracy to commit elimination and sentenced to 6 years in prison in December 2018. But even as he languished in an Irish jail, his name continued to send ripples through the criminal underworld. The arrest of Imre Arakas was the kind of breakthrough that the authorities had been waiting for, a rare opportunity to infiltrate the inner workings of one of Europe's most dangerous criminal networks. For years, the Kinahan Cartel had operated with near impunity, employing violence, intimidation, and a network of trusted enforcers to maintain their grip on the narcotic trade. But with the capture of one of their most trusted assassins, the house of cards they had so carefully constructed was about to come crashing down. In the days following Arakas' arrest, Garda and British security agencies intensified their efforts to dismantle the Kinahan crime group. The surveillance of Arakas had not only prevented the assassination of James "Mago" Gately, but had also yielded invaluable intelligence. Text messages, encrypted communication, and detailed maps of Gately's movements were discovered on Arakas' devices, offering authorities a rare glimpse into how the crime group planned its hits. This intelligence would prove to be a treasure trove, leading to a series of high-profile arrests in the months that followed. That's how, for the Kinahans, the arrest of Arakas was more than just a loss of a hired gun. The Kinahans had long relied on their network of assassins to do their dirty work, but with Arakas now behind bars, the crime group's ability to carry out hits with impunity was seriously compromised. Still, even as the walls began to close in on the Kinahan Cartel, the organisation was not about to go down without a fight. The OCG's leadership, Christy Kinahan Sr. and his sons Daniel and Christopher, knew that they were now in the crosshairs of the authorities, but they managed to avoid arrest, despite having US sanctions rolled out against them. The arrest of Imre Arakas, however, changed one thing. For the first time, Daniel Kinahan was directly implicated in an assassination plot. The evidence gathered from Arakas' devices pointed straight to Daniel's involvement in the plan to take Gately, and while Daniel himself was not in Ireland at the time, it was clear that he had orchestrated the hit from afar. This revelation put Daniel squarely in the sights of the law, and it wasn't long before he became the primary target in the ongoing investigation into the Kinahan Cartel. What's more, authorities were using the intelligence gained from Arakas' surveillance to build cases not just against the Kinahans, but against their entire network of associates. But the story of the crackdown on the Kinahans has long become old news. So, let's jump right into the events surrounding the trial of Imre Arakas. In 2018, he stood trial in Dublin for his role in the plot to assassinate James Gately. The trial was a media sensation, attracting widespread attention not just in Ireland, but across Europe. Arakas knew he was on the ropes, as the evidence against him was overwhelming, and there was little his legal team could do to counter the mountain of proof presented by the prosecution. Throughout the trial, Arakas maintained a stoic demeanour, showing little emotion as witness after witness detailed his involvement in the plot. But behind the scenes, it was clear that the pressure was beginning to take its toll. In the end, the verdict was never really in doubt. Imre Arakas was found guilty and sentenced to 6 years in prison. It was a relatively light sentence for a man who had been involved in such violent crime, but it was clear that Arakas' days as a free man were over. And the same fate awaited many Kinahan lieutenants, particularly after the capture of Thomas "Bomber" Kavanagh. Nevertheless, Imre Arakas' trial was one of the most highly anticipated events in the long-running saga of the Kinahan Cartel. For months, the Irish public had been gripped by the details of the crime group's violent campaign against the Hutch gang, and Arakas' arrest added a new chapter to the story. Here was a man who had spent decades operating in the shadows, a professional killer with a reputation for ruthlessness. Now, he was being brought to justice, and the full extent of his criminal career was about to be laid bare. During the trial, Arakas remained defiant. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, including intercepted communications and surveillance footage, he maintained that he had come to Ireland for camping, not to kill anyone. But the jury was not convinced, and, after a brief deliberation, Arakas was found guilty of conspiracy to murder. His conviction was a major victory for Garda and their European counterparts, who had worked tirelessly to bring him to justice. At his sentencing, Arakas was handed a lengthy prison term, one that would ensure he would never again be free to carry out a contract elimination. The judge, in handing down the sentence, made it clear that Arakas was not just an ordinary criminal, but a hired killer whose actions had left a trail of destruction across multiple countries. His imprisonment, the judge said, was a necessary step in protecting the public from the violence that men like Arakas unleashed. But even as Arakas was led away in handcuffs, the shadows he cast over the world of organised crime remained. His name, whispered in dark corners of Europe's criminal underworld, still inspired fear. How did he manage to create such a palpable sense of fear among people? The criminal reach of Imre Arakas extends far beyond the attempted execution of James Mago Gately. To truly understand the magnitude of his operations, we must delve into his other heinous acts across Europe, particularly his connection to the 2016 elimination of Lithuanian MMA fighter Remigijus Balkamicius. This crime, executed with brutal precision, solidified Arakas' reputation as one of Europe's most feared assassins. Arakas was extradited to Lithuania in connection with Balkamicius' death, who was gunned down in the streets of Kaunas. The 24-year-old fighter was an accomplished MMA athlete with a promising career ahead of him, yet his involvement with criminal elements sealed his fate. Arakas, hired to eliminate Balkamicius, was offered the sum of €50,000 for the hit. The fact that he accepted such a price highlights the level of his financial desperation, something he later admitted to during his trial. Arakas, in a rare moment of vulnerability, confessed to his motives, saying, "I was in financial difficulties. It was the biggest mistake of my life. If I could change something, I wouldn't do it again." The elimination was shocking, also because it was executed with terrifying efficiency. The weapon used in the elimination was notorious for its power and accuracy in close-quarter combat. We cannot disclose its name because YouTube wouldn't like it. The use of such a weapon is rare in Gangland killings, further showcasing Arakas' fearlessness and ruthlessness. This was after an initial failed attempt in which his weapon jammed. After the botched attempt, Arakas returned to Lithuania, determined to complete the job, this time armed with a lethal arm. This method was chilling, a calculated ambush that left Balkamicius with no chance of survival. But it wasn't the only crime Arakas has been tied to. In addition to the Balkamicius elimination, Arakas has been implicated in several other unsolved assassinations and criminal conspiracies across Europe. His reputation for being a reliable hitman for hire made him a valuable asset to various criminal syndicates, particularly those operating out of Spain and Eastern Europe. In Lithuania, Arakas was also named in another assassination case involving a high-profile criminal leader. These killings are often connected to narcotic trafficking and organised crime, highlighting how far his influence extended. Each of these hits had a price attached, and Arakas made it clear during court proceedings that his involvement was always tied to his financial needs. His confession in a district court revealed a man not driven by loyalty or ideology, but by the need for money. He revealed that his financial reward for some of these eliminations never fully materialised. In one case, he was promised €25,000, but only received a few thousand. For the Balkamicius assassination, the €50,000 bounty also never fully reached him. Arakas' method of operation involved careful planning, surveillance, and a ruthless determination to complete the job. As he once explained, there was no rush, so I could take my time and do it properly. This was the case in both the Lithuania and Ireland, where he meticulously planned each assassination attempt, often conducting low-tech stakeouts on foot or by bicycle. His ability to blend into the environment, posing as a casual bystander, allowed him to avoid detection for years. His chilling work ethic didn't go unnoticed by authorities either. It was through collaborative efforts across European security forces that Arakas was eventually apprehended before he could carry out the hit on Gately. His arrest in Ireland and subsequent extradition to Lithuania were the result of a sophisticated intelligence sharing between agencies. Arakas' network was vast, but it wasn't infallible, and his capture marked a significant blow to the broader European underworld. The €50,000 bounty on Balkamicius was part of a much larger criminal operation involving narcotics trafficking and rivalries within the Lithuanian underworld. Arakas' involvement in this incident exemplifies how he was often contracted to resolve disputes by eliminating key players in these criminal networks. His reputation was such that he became the go-to hitman for gangs needing a reliable executioner. Despite his arrest, Arakas continues to downplay his role in these killings. He often claimed to be a tourist or a fisherman, attempting to distance himself from his violent past. However, his admissions in court, particularly about the Balkamicius elimination, shed light on the depths of his criminality. "I did it, I got paid. I was offered 25 grand for the first shooting, and $50,000 for the second. His cold acknowledgement of these contracts reveals the transactional nature of his work and the grim realities of life spent as a professional assassin. As Arakas's crimes unfolded across Europe, it became clear that his actions were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger, more sinister pattern. Whether in Lithuania, Spain, or Ireland, Arakas left a trail of violence and death that spanned countries and criminal organisations, a true demonstration of the dark world he inhabited. The European Union, in collaboration with Ireland, Spain, and Lithuania, had been on Arakas's trail for years. Known as a gun for hire, Arakas had been implicated in several high-profile hits, not only in Ireland, but also in Eastern Europe and Spain, where criminal syndicates operated alongside the Kinahan Cartel. Authorities in Estonia and Lithuania had long been gathering evidence against Arakas, linking him to multiple killings and conspiracies involving both narcotic crime groups and political assassinations. Now that he's finally been brought to justice for his crimes, although disproportionately, what's in store for Imre Arakas? The obvious course of action for authorities is to pressurise him into informing on the Kinahans. And, according to Arakas, not only has that happened, but he was also offered millions for it. However, a lot more happened during this time. Arakas completed his 6-year term, but his days of incarceration were far from over. He was extradited to Lithuania in 2023 for the elimination of Demantas Bugavicius in 2015. He is currently awaiting trial for the elimination and weapons-related charges in Lithuania. While giving an interview to Estonian TV, the Gun for Hire claimed that Lithuanian authorities tried to get him to inform on the Kinahans and even offered him $5 million for it. This is a strange proposal. It's abnormal. They want me to give up the Kinahan clan, said the assassin. I told them to fuck off. This offer for me is pretty crazy. How would they even make this deal? It's impossible. Remarking on the hefty award, he said, "Of course the sums are big, and they also promised me a new identity to go and live in the USA with my family. I will not make an agreement with the Lithuanian authorities. A terrifying label has been stuck on me, and it has little to do with reality." On his incarceration in Ireland for the Gately elimination attempt, he said it was like staying in a 3-star hotel. Prison in Ireland is okay if you were friends with the Kinahans. Interestingly, while he pled guilty to the Gately assassination attempt, he made a bizarre claim that he had only gone to Ireland for camping. "Look at these things I had in my bag. I wasn't going to kill anyone." He also denied involvement in the elimination of Bugavicius. However, the Lithuanian agencies found Arakas's fingerprints and DNA during an apartment search. He told the authorities at a hearing that he didn't know how his fingerprints and DNA were in the apartment, since he never lived there. But the security forces hadn't just found his DNA, which is incriminating evidence, but also other items in Arakas's daughter's apartment, including masks, camouflage noses, bulletproof vests, camouflage clothes, a rifle searchlight, and a map of Lithuania. Arakas has an explanation ready for this as well. Lithuanian policemen were very strict. They took a map of Lithuania, things I had for more than 20 years, my son's shoes. Looks like he wouldn't give up easily this time. Imre Arakas's failed hit on James Gately was more than just a botched assassination attempt. It was the beginning of the end for the Kinahan Cartel's reign of terror. Arakas, once a feared and respected hitman, was now behind bars, his career as a contract killer effectively over. But his legacy would live on, not just in the annals of European organised crime, but in the ongoing fight to dismantle the crime group he once served. But the story of the Kinahans is far from over. As the authorities continue to close in, the crime syndicate's leaders remain elusive, hiding behind layers of protection and operating from the shadows. Daniel Kinahan, in particular, remains a wanted man, with a $5 million bounty on his head and a global network of law enforcement agencies determined to bring him to justice. As the dust settles on the Kinahan Cartel's collapse, the Underworld is left to grapple with the power vacuum it has created. The fall of the notorious figures like Imre Arakas, a once feared assassin, marked the beginning of the end for the Kinahans. Arakas, who operated with deadly precision across Europe, had his reign cut short when international law enforcement apprehended him before he could execute his final mission. His failure, along with the arrests and trials of other high-ranking Kinahan members, exposed the syndicate's vulnerabilities, accelerating its downfall. For Imre Arakas, his story ends in a prison cell, far from the violence and chaos he once thrived in. The Kinahans, once the most feared and dominant criminal organisation in Ireland and across Europe, have now been reduced to a shadow of their former selves. Years of narcotic trafficking, contract killings, and influence over the Irish criminal underworld have crumbled under the weight of coordinated international crackdowns, encrypted communication hacks, and intelligence sharing amongst law enforcement agencies. Yet, as the Kinahans fell, another entity has emerged from the shadows: the family, led by the elusive Grendon brothers, Brian and Philip. In the vacuum left by the Kinahans, the family steadily expanded its empire, becoming Ireland's most powerful narcotic syndicate and a rising force across Europe. Where the Kinahans ruled through brute force and publicised violence, the Grendons operate with strategic stealth, mastering the art of narcotics distribution and money laundering on an unprecedented scale. With ties to the Turkish mafia and various European crime groups, the family has turned into a formidable global enterprise, able to evade the bloody feuds and public notoriety that took down their predecessors. In just a few years, the family outmanoeuvred its rivals, filling the void left by the Kinahans. The €8.4 million narcotic bust in the Aberystwyth aerodrome in 2022 was just one crack in their extensive operation, which is far-reaching and tightly controlled. The coordinated international effort that brought down the Kinahan Cartel is now setting its sight on the Grendons, and the latest interception of encrypted networks have begun to expose the depths of their criminal operations. But this is the way of the underworld. Every void is filled by another. Just as the Kinahans rose to power following the decline of previous criminal empires, the family stepped in to dominate the lucrative narcotics trade. However, every empire, no matter how formidable, eventually faces its reckoning. For the Grendon brothers, the future seemed bright, but the clock was ticking. It looks like these things are not looking good for the family syndicate as well. After multiple seizures and arrests, the syndicate is under close watch of the authorities. The cycle continues. Empires rise, ruled by fear, wealth and violence, and in time, each one falls, brought down by law enforcement, internal strife, or the next criminal group waiting in the shadows, ready to seize control. The underworld thrives in these shifting sands of power, and as one dynasty crumbles, another emerges to take its place. The Kinahans are a testament to this reality, and now the family stands at this precipice. Their time will soon come, and when it does, another group will rise from the ashes, until they too inevitably fall.